All right. Well, thank you for being here. This is our second installment of the Father Engagement Workshop series. We will have two more later in the winter and spring. But I'm very excited to have you here today, to have Mr. Neil Tift here with us today. He is the outreach coordinator for the Native American Fatherhood and Families Association. And if you look at his bio, which is so impressive, you can tell that his entire life's work has been really grounded in father advocacy. He has a really long and successful track record of directing organizations to do more for all fathers, with a special emphasis on low and moderate income fathers. Neil has led national fatherhood initiatives in addition to running father-focused programs at the state level. And most importantly, he is a father to 3 children of his own, a grandfather to 14, can you believe that? And a foster father to many more. We are very honored to have him here to share his perspective on how to better engage fathers in home visits. Thank you so much for being here with us, Neil.
Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation. Yes, I'm currently work for Native American Fatherhood and Families Association. I got to admit, that's a picture that's a few years old. I got a few more wrinkles now, but I'm work with Native American Fatherhood and Families Association, and my focus here is as a court navigator and outreach director. But I've been working with fathers. I developed a Father's Resource Center. I opened a Father's Resource Center in around Father's Day of 1990. We like that idea of giving birth to a father's program around Father's Day. And I've been working with fathers programs for the past 33 years. Oh, I forgot. Let me turn my phone off. So I'm going to be talking to you today about what I've learned in working with fathers. Well, for 4 years, I was a home visitor for Child Crisis Arizona. So some of this is what I've learned as a home visitor with Child Crisis here in Mesa. So next slide, please. American fathers are often more reluctant than mothers to fully participate in home visits. This tends to be true across a wide range of cultures, income levels, and education. There's just that expectation or that stereotype that the resources for dads are different from the resources for moms. Next slide, please. So to engage dads and men in families, we use the term men in families because when you're engaged in home visits, it might not be the biological father in the home. So the men in families can be the live-in boyfriend, the new husband, the foster dad, the adoptive dad, the grandfather, whoever is taking the place of the bio father. So he can just be men and families. It's important to address some of the common barriers and misconceptions that typically limit father involvement. What limits do you think might impact fathers? Next slide, please. For some unmarried mothers that might be reluctant to share information if she's receiving some form of public assistance, that once she identifies the father, that could impact her. For some couples, there are relationship issues that create distances between the moms and dads. Now, I'm not talking about domestic violence, was clearly a major issue. I'm talking about just some more of the ones where there's tension between the two and whether they're living in the same household or separate households. Next slide, please. Some mothers might feel the program benefits them, but they're reluctant to share the services if she has a strained relationship with the father. So again, whether he's in the home or not, she might just see that she prefers that the services be for her and her children and not necessarily the father or the men in the family. And there can be cultural expectations that fathers' responsibilities are outside the home and mothers' responsibilities are inside the home. There's several cultures where the idea that fathers would meet with a stranger in the home and have a stranger telling him what to do on the same level as the mother just might be something that we need to understand, that their culture would say that's not for us. Next slide, please. A lot of times men assume this type of program is not for fathers. If you look at a lot of the programs that are out there, family resource centers, parent resource centers, other programs, they tend to have a lot of resources for moms and children, and there isn't the expectation that dads are going to be involved. Another reason also is a lot of times there tend to be very few males who engage as home visitors in the first place. And some staff might feel they're not prepared or skilled in offering targeted services for fathers. This can be especially true if the father's from a different culture or if the father's really struggled with the system, whether that's due to incarceration or chemical or alcohol abuse or other issues. Next slide, please. This is my attempt at humor. Here's mom, here's dad. Next slide, please. Fathers and men in families tend to confront barriers that when they, with nonprofits, with social service agencies and government organizations. Government organizations can include things, like WIC or Head Start or any of those. That moms don't necessarily confront. And they usually, in my experience, tend to fall into three categories. The individual barriers are the barriers that men themselves carry. What does he tell himself? What is his self-talk about a father and asking for help? Does he ask for help? Does he see that he benefits from the system, or does he see that he's been oppressed by the system? So the individual barriers are the messages that fathers and men and families carry themselves. The second level of the barriers are organizational barriers. And those are organizations that you work for or other organizations in your community work for. And the third level of barriers are the societal barriers. These are the messages that men and women, moms and dads, that the system itself says about fathers. Because a lot of times, in my experience in the system, fathers tend to be either seen as suspect or invisible. They're not there at all, or they're suspect on why he's in this in the first place. So I'm going to ask you to get in a breakout, 3 or 4 people, and address these themselves. What do you see, briefly, what do you see are individual barriers that fathers might be confronting that they carry? What are the organizational barriers in your agency or the community? And then the societal barriers, the general ones.
Well, like you said, pardon me, some of them don't think it's their role at all to deal with these things, or they may be embarrassed, or depending on, like you said, the demographic or the age may be a barrier as to why they don't want to participate.
Yes, thank you, Letitia. Anyone else?
You can also
Yeah.
raise.
Go for
Go
it.
ahead.
Okay,
No, go
I would
for it.
say you can also get the perception when men are supposed to be seen as a provider, and then if they can't provide, there's something wrong with them.
Right, that he's a failure, or he's not stepping up to the plate, or he's not doing his share. And if that's an issue between the mom and dad, that can exacerbate it even more. Thanks, Douglas.
The system is designed to work against them in some ways, because if ever the mother had applied for benefits for their children, then they have a case that is specific to her and her kids. And then if he has them in his custody and needs to take care of them, but needs some assistance, they will give him a hard time because they're already on another case.
Yes. Again, good point. Good insights.
Sorry, she just reminded me that I met a couple of men outside of this type of service, just in my personal life, who feels that like family court is set up for the benefit of the women and not the men.
Yeah. And we also tend to see when a mom gets angry in court, she's protecting her children. And when a dad gets angry in court, he can be a threat. And I would never minimize domestic violence. So I'd never say, that we should treat that in a different sense. But just generally, when dads get angry, the bailiff steps in, or the judge, whatever, we just tend to respond to it differently. And we need to find ways, obviously, to keep everybody safe, but how we respond to that perception can be different based on gender.
Actually would like to add on, when it comes to societal barriers, is how, like, for example, how fathers are viewed within the media, especially those of a certain type of demographic, based on what is portrayed in media about them. as well as with family court situations, the stereotypes against the father, because, the relationship not working out for some reason, false claims, as well as the tendency of, I guess, society in general siding with the mother because of the stereotypes associated with mother versus father. I don't want to get too much into my personal experience, but I'm a single father and I've dealt with things. I've seen things myself and I'm currently experiencing something I won't get too much in detail about. But just want to say, Neil, that thank you for doing this because it's definitely touching a lot of sensitive issues that I won't discuss that I'm glad people are starting to understand and see when it comes to fathers and mothers and how the role they play in their children's life.
I kind of became interested in this subject when I went to a symposium and they talked about fathers in prison. And fathers in prison don't have near the resources that women do. And I found that very interesting. It's nothing I had ever thought of, but fathers have become more part of their kids' life in recent years. They do more, a lot of fathers. And so then to be in prison and they can't do these things that the mothers in prison can do doesn't seem fair.
Sure. I have taught in 2 prisons and 4 jail systems over the years, and that's true.
So that's
Go ahead.
Fair to say then it's gender and sexual bias, right? It's definitely what about the males who are themselves with another male and they want to have a relationship with their child who may be from a female relationship that they've had. So that could be difficult too. And like you said, the court has this, I have a son who's 25 years old. He's in nursing school, going to school, working, helping with his wife. And she has another kid from another man. But I guess basically is that, they listen to her, but now they're also listening to him because he's outspoken. And I tell him, it should only be fair because when she's working or doing something for herself to also, because nowadays you can't live in a single income family. I don't know who does that.
No.
Or you can't just live in one person doing it all and one person, So I think that people maybe in the higher powers, like the court system, should also realize that they themselves have to change the system, because we can be thinking a system and have all these talks all day and all night and conference. But they need to realize that they need to also attend a system. The talks, right?
Yes.
They also have to be an advocate. That way, we're not just talking about it and then another kid who's 25 years old or another new dad that's really doing their best, or maybe they've had a rough life and they've never had a mom or a dad to show them about how it is to be a father. Give them an opportunity. But instead they really slam the door in their face. And then the next kid that they have is the same thing, so it's a pattern. So anyways, thanks.
Thank you. The other area is societal barriers. What do you see are societal barriers?
Family court.
Yep, I agree. There's so many ways, so many paths we can take with this. How much time do we have left in the 4 minutes? Anybody have a clock? I don't see one on mine.
No, and Neil, I also didn't open up the breakout, so we have been whole group. Would you like people to go into their groups of 3 or 4 at this point?
I'm sorry. I thought we had gone into breakouts.
No,
okay. No, we can go back to the full. No, let's just continue.
In the full group. Okay.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Next slide. Next slide, please. When scheduling a home visit, ask if there are times that both parents are available to meet with you. If there are 2 parents in the home and there's a mother figure and a father figure, It obviously is best to try to see that. When I worked at Child Crisis, we had the option 1 or 2 days a week to go work from noon till 8 instead of 8 till 5, so we could accommodate home visits in the evening. And we know that moms work outside the home too, so it isn't just the benefit of dads, it's for the benefit of both parents. So if we schedule a visit to accommodate both of them, it's more likely to be successful. Next slide, please. And in the baby food department, they don't want to bring home the wrong baby food. Next slide. If you're visiting home of a single father or a single mother, it's really important to acknowledge the fact that they're assuming twice the duties of a two-parent household. We just heard that one of the participants here, at least one, is a single mom. And it's true that we really want to acknowledge how much additional responsibility that is, because they can be addressing concerns that are different, more daunting than if they're two wage earners and two parents in the household who both can deal with discipline and 3 a.m. feedings and all the issues that a family's going to deal with. Next slide, please. When you arrive, mention you have information about resources that's specifically of interest to fathers and men and families. So what I suggest, when you're going to be going to homes where there's a male in the home, a man in the family, a father, please identify resources in the community that offer those drop-in groups, classes in English or Spanish or whatever the prevalent languages are that you serve. Look at who's doing what. Are there special events or special activities? There's always going to be, I'm going to make a broad assumption, there's always going to be something around the third weekend in June for fathers, so that can be cool. But, moms are moms 365 days a year, and dads are dads 365. So you want to find also activities, events, classes, workshops, webinars, links where they can go to get information, where they can do that. So let's do this. Let's break this out into for 4 minutes in groups of 3 or 4. What do you think might be 2 or 3 specific resources that any fathers that your agency is serving or wants to serve might be in need of? Is it anger management? Is it legal assistance? What are the most important resources you think dads might need?
All right, I'm going to open up those breakouts now, and we'll see you back here in 4 minutes.
Thank you. Claire and Rebecca, you want to talk?
Yeah.
Since you're not joined.
Yeah. So to answer the question, I've been thinking about how to frame the resources. I think the way that we frame them for dads is different than the way that we frame them for moms,
Yes.
because so much is framed for moms. And I'm just thinking about my own little family here, right? And I'm just trying to think about what would my partner actually take advantage of, like, and how would I word it so that he would want to take advantage of it?
Yeah.
Seriously.
No, it's true.
Yeah. Because like mommy and me story times, obviously not something that's for dads, right? Like even if dads are welcome in the flyer, it's still mommy and me.
Or mom's clubs at the elementary school.
Yeah. Yeah, or MOPS, mothers of preschoolers. So yeah, I'm just thinking about how much is designed for women.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Things in which dads can be active with their kids. Seems like it would be a safer bet than like a sit down class, something that frames it in terms of being calm in the storm, because there can be a lot of stress with toddler feeding, like different issues, and like being calm is your best tool to solve anything.
father-child activities are one of the ones that do draw. We find that when I was at Child Crisis, when we had father-child activities, once a month we'd go bowling, or we'd go to the park, or we'd go do some activities that were dads and their kids. And that way dads could meet other dads and not feel threatened. If it's just guys meeting each other, some guys have this, well, who are you? Why would I want to talk to you? You're a stranger. But that barrier comes down when they're a father and their kids are relating to one another.
We're gonna start.
What?
Sorry, I queued up the video, Neil, that I'll play later. I just want to make sure it was working.
Oh, no, that's fine. Rebecca, anything you want to jump in on?
Yeah, she might not be there. She joined a little bit late.
Okay, that's
yeah,
right.
which is why she's out of the group. So.
Okay. The resources that we see, like for Native dads, unfortunately, one of the big ones are resources on sobriety, because the addiction is it flourishes so much on reservations and native dads in urban areas as well. So those are the ones. It's what men are comfortable asking for help. There are certain areas legal. If you have a family law clinic for dads, anybody, and a lot of dads will come to that. But if you have one on nutrition, no dads, well, very few dads will go to something on nutrition. It just sounds boring, But if you like extending your budget, your food budget by salvaging roadkill, you make it a guy thing,
Oh my gosh.
I actually saw that once. It was a joke.
Amazing.
What are resources that fathers are willing to ask for help rather than going at the prompting of the mom or their partner?
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. It looks like all of our breakout groups have returned.
Okay, I'm just making a note. All right. So one of the issues that came up here is that when we're looking at resources out there, what are resources that fathers themselves are willing to seek out? Many times in the social service delivery system, fathers are the secondary response. Fathers get the information from moms or from other people. But if you ask yourself, when you're looking at the fathers you serve or want to serve, what are the resources that they will seek out on their own? And one of the biggest ones I've seen is a family law clinic. Many fathers who are in transition, who are single fathers, and moms have custody of children for unmarried couples. Moms have full custody, and for dads, unmarried dads, they have custody or to have time with their children. It either has to be with the permission of the mom or going through courts. So if you want to get dads into a program, one way to do that is a family law clinic. And the second one is a child support clinic. So you have an attorney come in and talk, or you have someone from child support come in. Because healthy fathers just want a level playing field. Fatherhood work is never about taking anything away from moms. It's add dad. The whole thing is being father inclusive. So anytime you have this where you see resources who are one gender or one of the genders is bashing others, that's not what we want to promote. We want to have them think about what are resources that might benefit you, that are healthy for you and the rest of the family. Next slide, please. When meeting with a father for the first time, look at him and shake his hand. Tell him you're glad he's able to be part of the home visit. You'd like to speak to both of the parents. Now, this is only if it's culturally appropriate. There's some cultures where it's not appropriate for a male who's a stranger to a female home visitor. However dynamic, that you want to do this out of respect, but not if it violates the cultural norms of that family. Next slide, please. Here's mom, here's dad. Next slide, please. So bring select materials that are specifically targeted for fathers and men and families. Brochures, flyers, schedules, articles, other materials that are clearly of interest to dads and men and families. These can be links, these can be DVDs. Some larger agencies have a parent lending library where parents can come in and get materials, on discipline, on all, whatever they want. So if you have a parent lending library, have materials that's specifically for fathers and men and families. If you have a resource library for your staff, have materials for the staff that also focus on and target and help staff work more effectively with fathers. Next slide, please. Research indicates that how fathers nurture, discipline, and communicate with their children is very different sometimes from how mothers do this. We're talking about maternal instincts and paternal instincts. And while I realize there are more than two genders, obviously the world is no longer just male, female. But when we're talking about mothering and fathering, maternal instincts and paternal instincts, there are some differences. And what I'd like you to do is break out into groups now for 4 minutes and talk. Now, I know we're talking about stereotyping, so we want to avoid brutal stereotyping. There are differences. So I'd like you to discuss those in small group. What are the distinctions between maternal instincts and paternal instincts?
Well, open the groups now. See you in 4 minutes. And those who are not assigned, I am working to assign you right now. Okay.
Claire.
Shall I answer this question for you?
Well, what's your guy's name?
Ryan.
Ryan. That's
Like
right.
everyone
I knew
else
it.
born in the
I mean,
80s.
I've met him, but okay. What do you see between you two? What do you see are some of the distinctions that, we're not saying opposite, we're just saying you have a different frame of reference.
Yeah, I've actually been told that we are flipping gender norms. So a little bit. So Ryan is the one who is really cautious about what she puts in her mouth or what she's handling or what he wants to supervise her at all times. He kind of cares about what she's getting into. I care less if she spills over the box of Q-tips and plays with them on the floor. I don't care. He's like, that's, she's gonna put them in her mouth, he's gonna make a mess. I don't care as much. I'm like, whatever. So I'm more about explore. We both roughhouse with her, so we're like,
oh, good.
Yeah. But he is more of a protector, kind of like cautious, and I'm more of a like, let's explore. So I've been told that's usually flipped for.
Well, and what we tell people is, if you take a very large number of, say 100,000 parents, there are going to be some patterns, but if they don't fit that pattern, that doesn't make them normal. It's just not as traditional. Because I have sometimes either moms or dads that will say, well, I feel funny because I don't fit. And I say, no, if it's working for you, just go with it. Unless it's, holding the child upside down by the foot, then just go with what works. But okay, that's cool.
Yeah. And then Ryan is one who cooks dinner too. Mostly because he doesn't like my cooking.
Okay.
So I mean, yeah, if you're gonna complain, you're gonna do the work, right? But that's a good standard. If you have higher standards than me, then it's your job.
Do you cook really healthy food? Do you cook really healthy food?
No,
okay.
I think I just don't care very much about cooking, and so I'm like, like whatever works, whatever is simple. But Ryan really likes. He is an excellent person, and he really likes excellence. I'm more about getting it done. He's more about excellence, and I think that's a good compliment.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he cooks. Yeah.
Yeah, that get her done is more of a guy thing. So you're right. You have But again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, especially if it's working. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Abigail, would you like to join us?
Hi. Sorry. I
No, that's
found
fine.
the link and But I'm a little lost.
Oh, we're just talking about some differences you've observed between maternal instincts and paternal instincts.
Oh, they need a lot of redirection.
Who?
When it comes to the instinct, it's like not like the fathers, like at least in my cases, they need a lot of redirections.
Oh, the dads?
Yeah. They
Because
need a
they do things then the guy way, you mean?
no. It's they panic. Like they
Oh,
panic
okay.
when they come to like being um the primary care caregiver. They're like, I thought this was easy, but it's not.
Okay.
So
So are these new dads?
not necessarily, no. It's a lot of I get a lot of like Spanish speakers,
Okay.
Hispanic. So the role is very well,
Traditional?
yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about is we always, since I work with Native fathers, we always want to respect the traditions of that culture and try to understand why their parenting style or their parenting approach is what it is. Because we
Mhm.
want to threaten the culture, but we do want to make sure that children are safe. That's the primary focus.
Neil,
So what?
I'm just gonna cut in and let you know everyone is back in the main space.
Oh,
Yeah.
let's go then. All right, thanks. Did you enjoy this opportunity to talk about some of the difference we see here? Your moms, your dads. Next slide, please. Here's how the father sees it, how the child sees it, and how the mother sees it. Think of all the times okay. No, we go on. This one is research shows across cultures, moms tend to hold their infants in toward her chest, offering that sense of warmth and calm and security. Dads, on the other hand, a lot of times hold their children with their hands or like this, facing outward, because dad's approach tends to be more preparing their child for the world. This is what the world looks like. Mom's calming the baby down, and dads tend to more stimulate or excite their children. That's more of a paternal instinct. But now I want to say this. If this isn't what you see in your own family, that doesn't make it abnormal. It just means it's not as traditional. If you take a very large group of parents, there are going to be some patterns that we see. Also, dads tend to just make stuff up because you see how the mom's pouch is prepared and very detailed. And dad probably just took this thing and just kept wrapping until he saw his kid wouldn't fall out of it and then decided to go to work on the phone. So yeah, it's there are some distinctions. Next slide, please. Halloween. Here's mom. Dad might be a little bit more morbid. Next slide, please. If you're looking for articles, parenting tips, and related information that you want to bring on home visiting, there's several websites that have a lot of good information. The National Responsible Father Clearinghouse is a federally funded program, and they have lots of articles that you can just go in specific categories and copy free of charge. All Pro Dads, I just want to, they're very good, but half of them are Christian based and the other half are secular based. So if you're looking for ones that are just secular, All Pro Dads has those as well, but they also have ones that are faith based, but only Christian. And so the idea is that you have a place to go to pull out information. So when you're going and there's a dad, especially say he's having an issue with a specific sleepless nights with his 2-year-old, what you can do with that, whatever it is, teething, you can have articles on dads can do to help with the baby with dealing with teething, any of those. And I put this in red. We want to be aware of personal messages that we carry about fathers and men. When you think of the fathers that you work with, you probably have an idea of the ones that you're very comfortable with and the ones that you're not comfortable with. I've been working with dads for over 33 years. I understand anger. I actually can work with angry dads more than I can work with dads who whine. I'm not as tolerant of whiners. I want them just to say, get in there and do it. But each of us have our own messages that we carry. And so it's not saying this is bad. It's saying be aware of them. What are those types of dads that you know you'll be comfortable with, and what are those types that you may not? If you're working with single fathers, if you're working with fathers of children with special needs, if you're working with other dads that have, gay dads, if you feel that you don't have the expertise for some of those, that's okay. Either get some help or make a referral. Next slide, please. Ask them if they'd like to have a few minutes of one-to-one when you talk about specific parenting issues, if this is culturally appropriate. Again, depending on the culture. Often a father might open up when he feels he can trust you to listen to him in a non-judgmental way and ask for your perspective. Now, he's not going to say, I want your perspective, because a lot of times dads don't just take the information and follow it. But when I would do home visiting, I'd usually go with a female home visitor, and we'd both go into the home where there's a mom and a dad figure. I would, after we met for 15 minutes, then I would usually go out for a walk or go into into the kitchen, or we'd go walk to a park if there was one close by, or go into the backyard with one of the children. And I would observe him interacting with his child or with his children one-to-one. When we would go off, he and I, over 95% of the time, I didn't have to say anything. He would just talk. I could ask questions, but dads will open up one-to-one, many times with another guy. But if you don't have male home visitors, then with a female home visitor as well. I will say this, most agencies that I've worked with, or with doing webinars or just staff training, staff development, it isn't that they won't hire men. It's unfortunately that most men don't see this as a career choice. Men themselves are not seeing that they want to go into this. And that makes me very sad that as a man, I wish there were more guys doing this kind of work. Man to man, father to father can often help motivate more men to be there for their children and to be there, show respect for the mother of their children. So a lot of this is how we approach them in a non-judgmental way, no matter what gender we are. Next slide, please. Learning styles is important. Ask the dad how he thinks he best learns. Does he, when he needs to acquire a new skill, reading articles or books, taking a class, watching videos, online learning, actual hands-on demonstrations, listening to or watching a DVD, or attending a dad's group, a drop-in group? Are there such options available for him? So when you look in your communities, are there different, as you look at this list, and there can be others that are not on here, obviously, what do you think are some resources for dads who have different learning styles? The three primary learning styles, there's the visual, and men are very visual. There's the auditory, how we learn from what we hear. And then there's kinesthetic. It's the hands-on, it's moving through space. And so hands-on are things like when we're doing an exercise, when we're teaching them maybe how to make a formula. How do you make a formula? That can be hands-on. That's demonstrating in the kitchen. How do you put the formula together and warm it up and have the appropriate temperature for the child? That's an actual hands-on demonstration. So there are different learning styles. As I said, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So the more ways we can offer a dad to get information, just like we would for a mom, the more likely he's likely not only to observe it, but to then take it on himself and internalize it. Next slide, please. There's mom, there's dad. Next slide. Mama and Papa. Next slide. Men's learning styles and parenting approaches tend to be action-oriented. Dads use their bodies more. There are two major distinctions in maternal and paternal instincts. The first is that fathers tend to use their bodies more than moms when they interact with their children. Now, this is not 100%, but more dads tend to roughhouse, tickle, wrestle, use contact sports, interact like hunting, fishing, the sports type things. Dads use their bodies more. So if you're going to discuss skills, consider demonstrating them and then letting the father do that as well. Touching something, holding the baby. Moms, by the time a baby is 30 days old, Research shows that moms tend to approach and hold their infant 9 times out of 10 the same way. Fathers tend to approach and hold their 30-day-old infants 9 different ways out of 10. So if you're a home visitor and over the course of, say, an hour and a half, you see a dad hold his baby 4 or 5 or 6 different ways, you don't want to write down that he hasn't decided how he wants to hold his baby. That's a paternal instinct. Dads tend to move their body, their babies around to prop them up on their chest. And once they can hold their head up, they have their infant facing outward. Dads use their bodies in a lot of ways. Speaking of making formula, tend to notice the father's most likely to warm the formula. Okay. Yeah, whatever works. Moving through space, walking holding the hands of the toddler while they're walking, or mixing, arranging, wiping, dressing, rocking, changing, all those verbs. Active methods. Dads like that stuff because our brains are wired for that. The studies showed they had a 6-week-old infant laying in a crib with a mobile on one side and a human face on the other side. 95% of the 6-week-old female infants looked and focused on the face. 96% of the male infants focused on the mobile. They watched as it moved around. Boys' brains, males' brains are wired for action. So, and we know that when we stimulate brains, the first 3 years of brain development are the most crucial. How we nurture them, encourage them, touching, holding, rocking, singing, cuddling, cooing, all those things are important. The positive ones at that healthy stimulation strengthens the wiring in their brains, and that the more that they are developed, the more the wiring connects with each other. We can actually increase the baby's potential IQ. So when dads and moms engage in these types of activities, that's helping with normal child development. Next slide, please. Here's mom. Here's dad. He's an idiot. The grill isn't really lit. It did say that when I first found this source. It wasn't really lit. That's the same guy that was using the leaf blower on the little girl's face. So we can just, if you're a home visitor, okay, here. I really think that if you have a chance with staff at some time during staff development, just to look a little bit into left brain, right brain, because left brain and right brain hemisphere, left hemisphere, right hemisphere functions are different. And for many generations, the dominant culture in the United States, the European American culture in the United States, has encouraged males to engage in left brain thinking, as you see here on the left. And the dominant culture has encouraged girls and women to more do the right brain thinking. And we don't have to buy into that. Left brain thinking is logical and analytical, it's hierarchical, it's realistic, it's hands-on, it's sequential, it's making decisions based on reality. So when we look at what goes on in the left hemisphere of the brain, it's the sciences, it's the dealing with facts and figures. The right hemisphere of the brain is more lateral thinking. We're all in this together. It's more like a circle. It's more creative. If any of you are highly artistic, music, drama, art, anything, you're going to your right hemisphere to be creative. The left side is logical. The right side is intuitive. So as you go through this, you'll see that these qualities, all of us at some point tend to favor, well, there are some that are bilateral, but most of us tend to have one hemisphere more dominant than the other hemisphere. And the reason I throw this in is because I think this is a reflection of gender and what we've pushed generations of girls and boys, of men and women to do. And the idea is that we don't have to fit into those boxes. I'm a right brain male, so I knew a long time ago I would never be able to support myself in sales or in science or in Wall Street type, that I'm very much more of a people person and more of a teacher. And so I think that's one of the reasons I've been working with dads for so long, because that's a reflection of how I approach things. I just suggest you look into this a little bit for how your staff approach problem solving, how your staff approaches decision making, how your staff approaches a lot of things that you do, because it explains things. There's no blame to any of this. It clarifies things that if you're working on a project and you have a left brain person in charge of it, that's going to be healthy, but the right brain person is going to go, why? So anyway, take a look at this and how it affects the parents that you work with how they then encourage that in their children. Next slide, please. We don't have time for the 13-minute version of Tale of Two Brains, but we do have time for the 5-minute version. I encourage you to look at the longer one. It's great, but here we go.
Discussing men's brains, women's brains, and how they're very different from each other. Now, I want to start with men's brains. All right. Now, men's brains are very unique. Men's brains are made up of little boxes. And we have a box for everything. We've got a box for the car. We got a box for the money. We got a box for the job. We got a box for you. We got a box for the kids. We got a box for your mother somewhere in the basement. We got boxes everywhere. And the rule is the boxes don't touch. When a man discusses a particular subject, we go to that particular box. We pull that box out. We open the box. We discuss only what is in that box. All right? And then we close the box and put it away, being very, very careful not to touch any other boxes. Now, women's brains are very, very different from men's brains. Women's brains are made up of a big ball of wire. And everything is connected to everything. The money's connected to the car, and the car's connected to your job, and your kids are connected to your mother, and everything's connected to everything. It's like the internet superhighway. Okay? And it's all driven by energy that we call emotion. It's one of the reasons why women tend to remember everything. Because if you take an event and you connect it to an emotion, it burns in your memory and you can remember it forever. The same thing happens for men. It just doesn't happen very often because, quite frankly, we don't care. Women tend to care about everything. She just loves it. Okay. Now, men, we have a box in our brain that most women are not aware of. This particular box has nothing in it. In fact, we call it the nothing box. And of all the boxes a man has in his brain, the nothing box is our favorite box. If a man has a chance, he'll go to his nothing box every time. That's why a man can do something seemingly completely brain dead for hours on end. You know, like fishing Now, they've actually measured this. The University of Pennsylvania a couple of years ago did a study and discovered that men have the ability to think about absolutely nothing and still breathe. You know, they connected down the wires and stuff like that, and watch the brain activity, then all of a sudden, it's I think he's dead. Huh? Women can't do it. They can't do it. Their minds never stop. And they don't understand the nuts and bolts. And it drives them crazy. Because nothing drives a woman more crazy or makes her feel more irritated than to witness a man doing nothing.
Obviously, there was a problem with audio on that one. This guy's he's done research on brain for years, and he works with couples. And I encourage you, if you like that or if you disagree with it, to check out the longer version, because he does have some information that does make sense on how men and women approach problem solving differently. So again, if you're doing home visiting and a guy is trying to figure out something that we talked about, all the verbs on mixing and interacting and holding and moving through space, he might approach it in a little different way because his learning style is different. Not opposite, just different. Next slide, please. During your conversations, look at him, engage him as often as seems appropriate. You don't have to do the 50-50, but try not to just to speak mostly to the mom. If he feels marginalized or ignored, he probably won't prioritize your future home visit. If you, as a mom, as a woman, have ever like gone to a place, like the stereotype is car shopping, and the salesman only looks at the guy, and you know how that irritates people when the person feels devalued because of their gender. Well, I would just use that same approach here. It doesn't have to be 50-50, but have examples, have ideas that he can relate to as well. Because the female visitor, the mom, is great, and she should do all that stuff that she needs to do to connect and make that home visit beneficial to the mom. So think what also might make it beneficial to the dad, because we do want him to come back and he prioritized that future home visit. Next slide, please. When you're speaking with the dad, try to sit beside him, shoulder to shoulder. A guy's learning style is shoulder to shoulder. So if there's a couch or if there's a dining room table and you have some materials you want to show him, spread them out in front of him and sit side by side. The straight across, eye to eye, is not as effective with guys, especially if you represent the system or if this is one of your first visits, because he's still trying to figure out, what's going on. So like I said, the men's learning style is the side by side, shoulder by shoulder. If that's not an option, then the 90-degree angle again can be working. Like if you have a couch here and a couch 90-degree angle. But again, this is something it's more effective with guys. Next slide, please. Guys, a lot of guys struggle. It's called alexithymia. It's a Greek term that knows I don't know how I'm feeling. And as a result, I have a dad that's basically. Okay, knee to knee. Okay. The alexithymia is he doesn't know how he's feeling. As a result, dads might have difficulty understanding, articulating what's going on for them. So the next slide, this will explain something. So don't ask a dad, how does he feel about something? For women here who have a male partner or a male coworker, I would suggest not asking how you feel. If we ask a guy, what was that like for you? He doesn't have to figure out how he was feeling. He just starts going on with the situation. Well, Steve made me angry, and then I realized that I didn't like it and that he was forgetful, and that made me angry, and then it made me anxious that we wouldn't get the project done, and then I was envious of it. So don't ask him how he feels. Say, what was that like for you? When he's going through this journey, telling what it's like, then he's figuring out his own feelings. And then that alexithymia is diminished. Next slide, please. Open-ended, we all know that open-ended questions are important. So ask him about his child-rearing activities around the home. How is he involved with the baby or the child's or the children's daily routine? In my experience, families have 5 routines. There's the breakfast routine, the early morning routine. The second is the after school routine. The third is the bedtime routine. The fourth is the bedtime routine. And the fifth is the weekend routine. Children really benefit from having schedules. They know what's going to happen at breakfast. You know, there's the breakfast routine. There's going to be food there. Somebody's going to be there to help me find my homework. If I need my jacket or my shoes or whatever, somebody will be there to help there. After school routine is very important. You know, that's why we have some of those programs for after school so that they feel safe and they're not getting into dangerous activities as an adolescent. And then the dinner time routine, you know, what do they expect? How do each person contribute? Do they feel safe? Do they feel welcomed? The bedtime routine, you know, is how is dad involved in that? You know, what's involved in the bedtime? You know, is it taking a bath or shower? Is it putting their clothes out for the next day, getting their homework ready, having a snack, you know, reading a book or saying a prayer or tucking in or whatever it is? But those routines are important. And when dads know those routines are important, they might be more willing then to jump in and do more rather than not doing that. What skills does he feel confident about? What are his strengths as a dad? This is how you make a father feel comfortable. Many programs, many agencies, many people who serve fathers look at what fathers' deficits are, not his strengths. If you look at resources for dads, they tend to be child support enforcement. They tend to be, you know, Department of Corrections. They tend to be anger management or domestic violence. And if there is an issue with domestic violence or anger management, yes, that's important, but not all men need that. So when we start with what his strengths are rather than what his deficits are, when we go in to do an assessment, he's going to feel respected and he's going to want to come back. Next slide, please. Here's some of the things that we look at level of involvement. If the mom is not breastfeeding, or even if she is, do they also do formula prep? How comfortable is he with holding the baby, and how does he do that with bathing, changing the diapers, or with wet clothes? How does he interact with the infant or the toddler? When feeding the child, does he get up in the night to bring the baby in to be fed? Or if there's formula, can he just sit in the infant, if there is a room for the infant, and rock the baby to sleep so mom can get some rest, or whatever that is? Next batch of these levels of involvement. Does he rock the baby to sleep? What approach does he use to calming the baby? Reading or singing to the baby, dressing the child, packing the diaper bag, all of these. Taking the child on errands. When dads take kids on errands and expose them to the real world, how dad sees it, you know, whether it's to the barbershop or the bank or the grocery store to gas up, or, you know, whatever they're doing. When the dad's out there with the child or the children without mom, dads tend to focus on things that the mom doesn't necessarily do. And this can be really beneficial for for all kids to look at what, you know, how they see the world from the dad's point of view. Next slide, please. Other questions you might ask, or you ask yourself, what is his reaction when he's alone with the child? You can observe this in what's going on in the dynamics in the household. Are there significant differences between how he parents their child and how the mother parents or interacts with the child? There's nothing wrong with having differences as long as both are safe and respectful. But again, this is going into the mindset that there are more ways. I like this one. Yeah. When dad's left alone with the child, next slide, with the baby. I'm a dad. I love this. Next one. There are a few of these. The baby sleeping, and that's his food tray. Next slide. We don't recommend it for long periods of time, but, you know, because all you have to do is pick the little white stand up, and then the baby's a little bit freer. Next slide. When dad is alone with the baby. Harley. No helmets, no seat belts, just laying on the mattress. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. All right. How does the dad handle stressful times with the child? When the child is crying, if the child has colic, if the child's running around and their parents or the dad are just trying to focus. When the child says no, when there's a home visitor there, how does he handle it? Does he stay calm? Does he use an approach that seems sort of funny because there's a stranger there versus not having a stranger there? Pacifiers on their forehead when they're asleep like a unicorn. Thank you, Michael. Take a picture. Yeah. How does he handle it when the child argues with him or has temper tantrums or makes a mess? Because usually, you know, when someone's coming over, a home visitor's coming over, or a team of home visitors coming over, sometimes, you know, the parents will straighten up, at least in the living room where they're going to be meeting. So what happens when the kids come in then and trash the place while they have company? Or how do they as a couple handle stressful times? When I talk about stress, I want to mention something. Bad stress is called distress. There's also such a thing as good stress. Most people don't know what it's called. Good stress is called eustress, EUSTRESS, like euthanasia is good death. Most families, when we're working with them, think that stress is bad. And a lot of times it is. What I try to emphasize with family members is what are the good stressors in their life? You know, what's coming up? What's going on that's a good stress? You know, well, grandma's coming to visit this weekend, you know, or we're going on a vacation, or this Saturday we're going to go somewhere that's fun, Ben and Jerry's, or, you know, something like that. Ask the family, what are some fun things? What are some good stressors that they have going? And it doesn't have to be a stress, but you can point. What the point is, it's not minimizing the distress, but it's saying there's can be some balance between the good stress and the bad stress. I had a guy in one of my groups. He was court ordered, and he was sitting there, and I said, Ernie, do you have any good stress? He goes, no. And I said, well, this was like in May. I said, well, did you get a tax refund? Well, yeah. I said, well, wasn't that a good stress? Well, yeah. So helping people find the good stressors can, you know, just help change the mood a little bit and help them see that their world has some good stuff going on as well, especially if they're really under a lot of distress. Next slide, please. What resources does he have to provide for backup when he's feeling stressed? Can he exercise? Can he go for a walk? Can he ask his partner to take over while he goes to do something so he can decompress and the family will stay feeling safe? It's very important that all family members feel safe. And we know from statistics, it's more often the males that tend to engage in the physical violence, the physical abuse, more than moms do. Now, when it comes to neglect, it's more balanced between moms and dads. But feeling safe is really important for all of us. You're welcome, Vanessa. What resources do they have to provide backup when they feel stressed? Next slide. Here, this will distress somebody out. Probably dad. Next slide, please. What skills would he like to improve, or what skills would he like to get some help with? I would say improve more. When you say get help, a lot of guys think, no, but what would he like to improve? What are his strengths, and what would those strengths? What skills would he like to strengthen? What skills would he like both of them to improve or to get some help with if they're both parents in the home? What task is he comfortable sharing with the child's mother? Next slide, please. What task does the mom feel uncomfortable with him performing? Does she feel uncomfortable with him engaging in certain things, like giving the baby a bath, or, you know, whatever it is? What task does he wish the mother let him perform more? You know, a lot of times, it's called gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is a sociological term that when a baby is born across cultures, mom set the tone and the pace for the baby to interact with the rest of the world. Say the baby was born in a hospital, and the baby and the mom come home from the hospital. Mom is the gatekeeper, and it's a good term. but she's, who's going to come to visit? When can grandma or grandpa come in? When are we going to allow other people to come in and see the baby? What are we going to do with the pets and how the pets interact? Because sometimes pets can be very territorial, especially some male dogs can be very territorial. So it's the gatekeeping role the mom plays is normal and natural. But as a female home visitor, you can talk to the mom about some of those things, about if she doesn't want dad doing this and doesn't want dad doing that. Is there a foundation for that? Is it a stereotype? I mean, if he really is, if there's a potential for harm, then absolutely you want that to prevail. But if it's just, well, I do things differently than he does, or I do things better than he does, because we know a lot of times the system assumes that mothers do things better than dads. And a lot of times it isn't better, it's just different. What future does he see for his child? That's one to get, that really get them going, get them to open up. What resources would he like to see available to him to be the best dad that he can be? And then the best parents that they can be as a couple. Next slide, please. Make your own observations about the items that we listed above. You yourself look at his personal comfort level and his skill level when he acts with his baby or with the children. But remember, dads do not mother their children. They father their children. Even when you think about that, in the English language, to father a child means to impregnate a woman. And to mother a child means to do so much more. Think of how just the fact that verb, to father a child, means all we need to do is impregnate her. We don't have to do anything else. What a horrible thing. It's part of our language. I don't know how to fix it, but I'm saying that's what it means to father. And moms, there's a one-letter difference between the word mother and smother in the English language. And I come from an Irish background, and my mom always, smothered us in love and with attention and with food and all those. One of my best friends is Italian, and the other one is Colombian. His parents are from Colombia. And both of those cultures also, the mothers smothered their children with love and attention and affection and touching and kissing and hugging and food. So it's good stuff. But look at those differences. You couldn't be more polar opposite to father and to mother a child. We have work to do. Next slide, please. During your visit, look for situations where the baby or the child responds positively to the dad's interaction. So when the baby hears dad's voice, does the infant turn his or her head toward dad, or raise their hands toward dad and wants to be picked up? Or smiling, does the child smile when the dad enters the room to pick up the child? If it's positive, point this out to the dad. Look at how your little guy really lit up when he heard your voice. Look at how your daughter came right over and wanted to climb on your lap. That's really a good thing. Dads need not phony praise. There's a difference between praise and encouragement. Praise is, and this is important when we're talking about children, praise is usually for something we do. Encouragement is for who we are. We praise a child for like getting an A in spelling or hitting a home run. But encouragement is we're encouraging them for their self-esteem. Encouragement is who they are. Praise is for what they do. Next slide, please. Ask him, this is really powerful. Ask him if he's able to be present at his baby's birth. Ask him, when I ask fathers, I do lots of fathers groups, and I'll say, were any of you able to be present for the birth of at least one of your children? When they raise their hand, 99% of the time there's a smile. It's a very transforming moment for most fathers. What was that like for you? What was that like when you saw your baby being born? They'll kid around and go, oh, it was yucky or icky, but it's a chance for them to see how much their mom went through the 9 months of carrying the child and the agony and the birth and all the stuff she had to do, and that he can appreciate all that mom went through. And then he's there, and then he's going to be there to raise that child. And when they're able to be present, I've had dad say, I bought a safer car. I started thinking about life insurance or health insurance. I stopped drinking. I stopped doing drugs. I stopped running around or whatever it is. And not all guys are going to do that, but it's very powerful. Yes, go ahead, John. Are you muted?
This was a father in a delivery room with his newborn. And the baby was maybe just born, 2 minutes old, screaming, screaming. And he says to the baby, I'm here with you. And the baby quieted down. So forward about to 8 or 9 minutes, and the baby is screaming and crying again. And he took hold of the baby's hand and said, "Your daddy is here with you." And the baby stopped crying. It was very moving to see.
Thank you. That's powerful. There are studies that show that a male's voice, because of the it's more bass and all that, it's not better than mom at all. But for kids who are acting out, that male voice and a male presence can, in situations, calm the situation down. Now, I don't know if it's fear or not. I mean, for the baby, excuse me, for the baby, obviously it wasn't fear, but yeah, there's a benefit to that presence. Yeah. How has that changed him? This
He
is
recognized his daddy's voice.
yes. Yeah, we recognize that. Thank you, Joan. Love that story. Oh, next slide, please. You might ask him what his relationship was like with his father, but maybe not. If you get the sense that it wasn't good, maybe you don't want to go there. Because unfortunately, a lot of times dads are not there. And obviously, the impact of father absence can be huge on families and communities and neighborhoods. Are there similarities between his parenting style and that of his father? Across all studied cultures, 3 primary roles that fathers were called upon, not men, but fathers, are protector, provider, and disciplinarian. Across all studied cultures, protector, provider, and disciplinarian. So because somebody just mentioned that earlier in breakup, fathers often see one of their primary roles as that of a provider. If he's not employed or if he's underemployed, that could be a sensitive issue for him. If he's home during the day because he lost his job, that's different than because it was COVID, and he had to do it for his family. Next slide, please. Look for potential areas of assistance or intervention. Is he interested in furthering his education? You could ask him, you could ask his partner. Are there indicators of depression or anxiety? Are you noticing any of those themselves for him, for the father figure? Is there a history of past abuse, neglect, or long-term instability? Remember when I said, when you go into the home and ask if they want to have one-to-one time and the mom goes to one place and the dad goes the other? If there is some type of abuse that's going on, this is when the mom could share that, if she felt safe with the female home visitor while the male home visitor is out with the dad. But if there's issues of neglect has a different impact than abuse, obviously, or long-term instability. Is there a need for financial numeracy? Financial numeracy is, budgeting and credit repair and all of those things. Some people call it financial literacy, but to me, that's wrong. Literacy is reading. Finance doesn't have to do with reading. It has to do with crunching numbers. So does he need help, or the family need help with that? Is there interest in family planning? Because sometimes birth control can have a little bit more loaded idea, a loaded concept. I use the term family planning because I've had guys, really all of a sudden occur to them, I don't have to have another baby. These don't tend to not be married, stable fathers. These are the ones that move in and out of relationships and bounce to, and you can just say, you don't have to have another child if you're not ready for it, and especially if you're not going to be there to raise it and support the mother of that child. So discussion of family planning in whatever your agency has about the philosophy of doing that in a respectful way. But family planning is a little bit easier term for some people. Issues around sobriety and staying clean. Again, does he need, or do any of them need help with that? And what are the resources then for doing so? Next slide, please. Dad's typically seen one of the primary roles as also protector of the family. So talk about how it might offer a sense of safety or security for the children in his home. This often gives him an added sense of purpose in interaction with their children. Let's look at a couple of them. Next slide, please, for protector. Is a household safe for their toddler or a child who's starting to crawl? Do the electrical outlets close to the floor have cover plates? Are the slats in the baby crib no wider than 4 inches apart? I was just talking to one of my nephew, who's an expectant father, and I asked, well, where you got the crib, and he got it from his wife's mother's mother. Well, old cribs tend to have slats that are further apart. 4 inches is what's suggested by those who talk about safety for infants. You know, if they got their crib from Goodwill or from a yard sale or something, it might be more dangerous just because the baby could then choke. So what are some other things? Are the nukes and pacifiers free of long cords that could strangle a child? Next slide, please. Are the bottles, cans, and other containers under the kitchen sink free of dangerous or toxic ingredients? You see the bottom where on the right where it shows Mr. Yuck? Remember years ago, it had the skull and crossbones? When I was young, it was skull and, well, people thought that was like for pirates, so they thought that was cool. And they said, no, you know what? That didn't tell them not to drink what's in the can. So now they have the Mr. Yuck to help children understand, no, you really don't want to even put that up to your lips. Are low-level functioning items, coffee tables and end tables, free of sharp or pointed edges that could hurt a falling or teething child? Short. And this one, a couple of years ago, right in Phoenix, there was a bookcase. A family was renting their apartment, and they had a bookcase. They had an entertainment center with a TV on it. The 4-year-old, he started climbing up on it, and it fell over and it crushed him, and the TV killed him. So if people have, you know, types of things like entertainment centers, especially renters, because sometimes maybe they're not allowed to bolt it into the wall, however you want to do it. I had an activity with a group of dads when I was at the Child Crisis Center between times when I was here. And we had a group of dads, there were about 8 or 9 of them, that was we did for expectant and new fathers, the boot camp for new dads. And we decided that most of them were first-time dads. So we decided that we'd go on a Saturday. We all went to one of those places where you get all the tools, Home Depot, and we got all this equipment, and the guys strapped on their tool belts, and we had 3 guys go to one home and 3 guys go to another home, and they baby-proofed or child-proofed the home. Because doing it alone, you can do it, but when you're doing it on a team, but it was a thing that guys really like doing it. They said, we want to do this again, but our place is all set up now. Where else can we go and baby-proof or child-proof a home? It's just for some guys, it's a guy thing. And doing it with other guys, and you're saying, maybe I'm helping prevent one of my buddy's friends from being hurt, being electrocuted, from drowning, whatever it is. Next slide, please. As children grow older, dads see their protector role. It changes to reflect that. Oh, you bet. Glad to, Michael. Yeah, it's a great organization. Boot camp for new dads, for expectant or new fathers, first-time dads. It's a great organization. Veteran dads helping rookie dads do the things they need to do. A third primary role that many fathers assume is that of disciplinarian. As I mentioned, those are the 3 primary roles. What is his style of preference in setting limits with his child? How will he help his child learn right from wrong and good from bad? Now, I'm not a veteran, but I've worked with some veteran dads when I was doing home visiting. And guys in the military, when they learn discipline in the military, is very different than you want to with a child. Discipline, the word discipline comes from the word disciple, which means to teach. Discipline is to teach a child. One of the exercises we did with fathers, this was a while ago, we did 3 columns. What's discipline, what's punishment, and what's abuse? And we'd have them put, in each of those 3 columns what it is. Dads need to understand healthy forms of discipline. Now, if it's cross-cultural, if we're working with fathers of other cultures, it can be difficult to tell a father that he shouldn't spank his child, because he can say, well, in my culture, my kids get pulled over. My kids get suspended because they don't fit in. Whatever it is, it's really important that dads find ways to talk about discipline. When I do it, when I did the classes, I talk more about setting limits than I use the word discipline. Because when you talk about setting limits, you can talk about natural and logical consequences. You can talk about iMessages. You can talk about a lot of different things that aren't strictly the idea of discipline. Because children clearly need to be able to develop their own sense of self-control. Because self-control is extremely important, especially for our sons. For every woman, in the United States is locked up long-term, 10 years or more in prison, there are 17 men incarcerated. That's a huge gender disparity. The number one reason males get locked up more than women is the lack of emotional regulation. If boys don't learn to stay calm when they get in a fight or hit somebody or drink and drive or harm their girlfriend or whatever it is, if boys don't learn to set with their own emotional regulation, that gets them locked up in the system. And we need to have males teaching males some of that. Moms can do it, but boys also need to hear it from a healthy male role model. Next slide, please. Attitude and response. What's his attitude when a child is disruptive during the home visit? Does he work with the mom? Does he let her handle the situation? Does he handle it himself? How are healthy limits set? Next slide, please. Halloween again. Here's mom. Here's dad. Can I go out and play? Papa says, yeah. Next slide. Language and thanks. Language and attitude is important in establishing rapport with parents. Dads might respond differently than mothers to certain words, phrases, or messages. As I mentioned before, to mother a child is different than to father a child. A lot of times that's not a biggie. The one that really gets me is when they talk about babysitting for their kids. Dads do not babysit for their children. They raise their children. They parent their children. They do not babysit. Next slide, please. Here's mom at the zoo. Here's dad at the zoo. Sports and cars are stereotypes of what men are called. If you're a female home visitor or a male home visitor, and you're comfortable talking about sports and cars as an icebreaker, because when you first walk in the home, you want to look around, but you don't want to look around like you're judging, their living quarters. And so sometimes they'll talk about what are safe things. So sports, cars, and weather. Well, here in Arizona, there isn't much to talk about weather. It's fine. But sports and cars, if you're comfortable using those sports analogies, go for it. But if not, don't go there. If you don't know that much about the teams out here, I'm a Vikings fan, so I don't know much about here either. So I'm from Minnesota. Some fathers might be reluctant to see themselves as a teacher to his child. Many of the dads I've worked with over the last 30 years, a lot of them either low or moderate income. So a lot of times they weren't able to finish school, whether they had to drop out to support a family or because they got in trouble and went into, the juvenile justice system or for some other reason. So if they associate school with that he's a failure or he dropped out or he had academic conflicts with the teachers and just didn't like school at all, then next slide is an alternative to helping him be a teacher. He is next slide, coach. Help the dad see how he might portray his role as a coach to his child. Because think of lots of guys are like coaches or like to see themselves as coaches. If we talk to him about coaching his kids, because coaching involves teaching teamwork and taking responsibility, focusing on the task sharing, all these good things, being honest, skill building, emotional management, number one. Emotional management, especially for our sons. Our daughters need it as much as our sons, but our sons get caught up and chewed out more than our daughters do because of that lack of emotional management. So you could talk about, if you get a sense for what's going on and what how he was raised and what he focuses on, have this as a backup. He's a coach to his child. Next slide, please. When your baby cries for your wife and creativity is your only thing you've got. So wrapping up, don't let paperwork get in your way. Obviously, it's important, but over time, allow it to promote more stimulating interactions with your families. Next slide. There's a hole in the soul of every child in the shape of their absent father. I don't know who this is from, but I think this is powerful. To the world, you might be one person, but to one person, you might be the world. Next slide, please. These are obviously about dads. My father didn't tell me how to live. He lived and let me watch him do it. Small boys become big men through the influence of big men who care about small boys. Very important. Next slide. Harmon Killebrew from the Minnesota Twins. My father used to play with my brother and me in the yard. Mom would go out and say, "You're tearing up the grass." We're not raising grass, my dad would say. We're raising boys. Next slide. And I try to put this on as many as I can of my slides. We need to teach our daughters to know the difference between a man who flatters her and a man who compliments her, a man who spends money on her and a man who invests in her, a man who views her as property and a man who views her properly, a man who lusts after her and a man who loves her, a man who believes he's a gift to women, a man who believes she's a gift to him. And then we need to teach our sons to be that kind of man. This is me.
Thank you so much, Neil. This was excellent. Thank you for everyone who is here with us today. I just dropped a link in the chat. If you would click that, that's our survey. Please let us know what you are taking away from your time here with Neil today. And thank you for your engagement and your participation. Make sure to grab Neil's email address in case you want to learn more, and be sure to join us in the spring, and in January and in March, we will have 2 more of these workshops in this series. Thank you, everybody.
If any of you want to connect by email or to talk about resources for dads, I'd be glad to follow up with any of you. Is there time for any questions or comments?
Yeah, we have 1 minute, and I just dropped your email in the chat.
Oh, good. Oh, 1 minute. Okay. Never mind. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you, Neil, for your time and your wisdom today. Appreciate you.
Sure. All right. Bye.
Thank you so much.
You bet. County.
Oh, now.
The dates of the next training?
Yes, January 24th and March 13th at the same time. And we'll also put flyers out and registration links as the time goes on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Josephina. Alicia, that's a question for...
Oh, sure. I'm happy. Do you mean the slides, Alicia? I will send a recording out to anyone who registered. The slides, Neil, if you're open to it, I'm happy to also include the slides. I also understand if you're not open to that.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, so I can include that in the recording email that I send out.
Sure.
Oh, I see. Certificate. No, I'm sorry. We don't offer what is it? What's the acronym?
CEUs?
Yes, thank you. CEUs, yeah. But that's a great question. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Please take that survey if you haven't yet, and I will send out an email with a link to a recording of this so you can share with anyone who wasn't able to make it today.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your help. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm sorry about the links not coming through. Next time I'll make sure that.
Well, yeah, well, I think it had to do with the volume, but
yeah.
What it cut out the laughing, but it got the words, and that was what was important.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, that reminds me, Neil, if you have the full length video link, I'll include that too.
Okay, I'll send it to you now.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good one.